Hey, North Shore, I'm Stan, and this week I'm joined by Carolyn.
Hello.
And we're kind of getting back to our usual after party format now.
Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. I haven't even been here that much. we're wrapping up. We just wrapped up our series on mental health and are now entering into a new series that is about Jesus, but also this week in particular is the start of the Lent season. And I was actually able to be the one who gave the sermon. And I talked about wilderness because wilderness is kind of the main metaphor that goes with Lent and how Lent is a experience of the wilderness and the wilderness is an experience of how God meets us and shapes us. And there's certain things that you can only learn when you're in the wilderness. And Carolyn, you were going to share with us about one of your wilderness experiences that was pivotal in your life.
Yeah. I have, well, if there's an anxietyism, I have it. So I have a generalized anxiety disorder. I have struggled with anxiety for years. But when it first hit me really hard was when I had my first panic attacks. And that led me through like a 7-year anxiety season. Wow. The first half of it, I was incapacitated, can't get out of bed, can't drive my babies to school. I couldn't eat. Sleeping was impossible. It was awful. And I kept crying out to God throughout those 3.5 years. And it was a desert season where I didn't hear from him. He was not present or near that I could experience or feel. And 3.5 years in, and I'm hurting. 3.5 years is a long time. And I had a dream. And God has never met me in a dream before or after. Just this one time. And so wake up in the morning. This dream is about a airplane flying through my life or over my overhead, and it tipped its wing. And somehow, I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that was God saying, we're halfway through. We're halfway. And I woke up in the morning knowing, okay, I got another 3.5 years. Do I cry? Do I laugh? I mean, how do I feel about this? But that moment was super precious because I knew God was near. I knew he saw me. He had a plan. And he was going to carry me through. I knew it was going to end, and I was going to make it. It was a lifeline of hope for me in one of my darkest moments. So when we talk about wilderness experiences, I had 3.5 more years to slog through, and it was an uphill slog, but it was a slog. But that is precious to me. It is a gift. I met him in a way he couldn't have provided without it being that dark or desperate.
Yeah, and you have this kind of bedrock moment of that experience. It's probably very pivotal in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
What has been the journey with anxiety and wilderness and God's presence now?
Yeah, well, this whole talk about mental health has been such a gift as I struggle with all of that. I still struggle with anxiety. I have, I don't know, dozens or more triggers from my past, and I become very young. It doesn't take much in this world to remind my soul of something that happened to me as a kid, and I'm very young again. And as my anxiety overwhelms me and takes over, I feel, act, and think like I'm either 3 or 8 or 10 years old. And so that as that anxiety soars really high, it just happened 2 days ago, I have to learn how to take care of myself and find God in that highly anxious space. And I have learned over the years how to do that well. I've learned how to not do it well. But it's just it's going to be with me for the rest of my life. Triggers and anxiety are a part of who I am. I'm getting better at loving myself and meeting God in those places. But it's a recurring wilderness experience for me.
Do you feel like you can find God in every one of those experiences, or are there times where you feel like, man, I wasn't able to find him today?
Yeah, it's 50-50 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, some days he's very near and dear, and other times I'm back alone, isolated and scared again.
Yeah. Which I think our heart goes out to you, and that sounds really hard. And at the same time, I think that's also a testimony to some people to know that everyone is also dealing with this. And it's not you had a miraculous moment, now you're perfectly fine. It's often a process for so many of us, and it's a journey. And, wilderness theme is, a lot of it is about, 40 years for these people, 40 days for these people, 3 years for Elijah, that's kind of the experience. And there aren't usually quick fixes, which is sad, but also at the same time provides some freedom to know, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of normative for following God.
Yeah, for me, in my experience, God does not work in days. He doesn't even really work in months. He works in years. And I think that's why people miss the beauty of what God can bring them, because they give up or walk away when he tends to work on long swaths of time.
Yeah, and so even though we are wrapping up a mental health series and starting a new series, we're also starting Lent, and this is all just the beginning of the journey. And like Carolyn was saying, we're on a yearly timeline, a decade-long timeline in some cases, and we just encourage you to be journeying still, to know that God will meet you, is present, is a provider.
He is.
And if you're the kind of person who's in a good season right now and doesn't necessarily feel like they're in the wilderness, Lent is an invitation to join us in the
Don't miss out.
Yeah.
Purposely putting yourself in the wilderness is hard, but it's kind of, it's such a blessing. Don't miss out.
And sometimes you have to simulate some of those things.
Right.
That's why people fast. That's why they give up sweets or Oreos or whatever it might be. But
That's right.
other times, you're already there and you know that you're there and God wants to meet you there. And we want to journey with you in that.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. We look forward to this Lenten season with you, and blessings on your night.
Yeah.